When we talk about verbs in Spanish, the easiest form to work from is called the infinitive form. In English, the infinitive of a verb is the form we use with the word to, as in to jog, to scramble, or to be or not to be.
In Spanish, all verbs in their infinitive form end in either AR, ER, or IR. So if we see a verb like hablar, once we spot that infinitive ending, we know that hablar must mean to something, in this case, to speak.
These three infinitive endings are so important because they let us divide Spanish verbs into three categories: AR verbs, ER verbs, and IR verbs. Once we know which category of verb we're dealing with, we can embark on a new adventure, conjugation. Let's take a look at one of the coolest verbs out there, hablar.
A typical Spanish verb is made up of a stem, like the H-A-B-L in hablar, and one of the three endings, in this case, AR. When we say conjugate, we mean changing the endings so that it reflects who's performing the action. Am I speaking? Is she? Are they? Conjugation unlocks these mysteries.
This conjugation business is where the subject pronouns come in. For each category of pronouns, yo, tú, usted, él, and ella, nosotros, vosotros, ustedes, ellos, and ellas, we have a different ending that we attach to the verb stem. For AR verbs, the endings are o, as, a, amos, ais, and an. Simply tag these endings onto your stem and presto, you've conjugated the verb. Hablo, hablas, habla, hablamos, habláis, hablan. Qué fácil.
Let's do one more for good measure.
Lanzar, to hurl or fling.
Yo lanzo, tú lanzas, usted, él, ella lanza. Nosotros lanzamos, vosotros lanzáis, ustedes, ellos, ellas lanzan.
Love them AR verbs, baby.
ER verbs work the same way as AR verbs. You just take the stem and slap on the appropriate ending. The only difference is ER verbs use a different set of endings.
The ER endings are
O, es, e, hemos, eis, en.
So to conjugate a verb like
Correr,
to run, we would say
yo corro, tú corres, usted, él, ella corre, nosotros corremos, vosotros corréis, ustedes, ellos, ellas corren.
Last but not least, we have the IR verbs, who, you'll notice, have remarkably similar endings to the ER verbs.
The IR endings are
O, es, e, imos, is, en.
So to conjugate a verb like
Vivir,
to live, we would say
yo vivo, tú vives, usted, él, ella vive, nosotros vivimos, vosotros vivís, ustedes, ellos, ellas viven.
Hopefully, all of this talk about conjugation is ringing a few bells in the old noggin. Keep in mind that all the tenses we've talked about so far let us conjugate verbs in the present tense. What do we mean by present tense? Basically, anything that's happening now. Right now.
in English there are lots of variations on the present tense. When we say I speak, I am speaking, or I do speak, these all correspond with the Spanish yo hablo. We can use yo hablo to express all this stuff.
Here's something else that's kind of cool. Notice that each of the different forms of a verb have different endings. For instance, if we say tú lanzas, you fling, we know that you're the one doing the flinging two ways. One, from the subject pronoun tú, and two, from the as ending on lanzas. Because the subject is sort of built into the verb, we can just chuck it and write lanzas. In fact, we can do that with any subject. Spanish speakers do it all the time, and darn it, so can we.
But there are some times when you may want to include the subject for clarification, contrast, or emphasis.
Felicia explica matemáticas a los peces.
Here we might want to include the Felicia just to make sure the listener knows who we're talking about. If we can assume the reader knows that Felicia is the one doing the explaining, we can leave it off. But if we need to make it clear that she is explaining, we leave Felicia in the sentence.
Nosotros escribimos cartas de amor a nuestro cantante favorito. Ellos no.
Here we might want to include the subject nosotros to contrast the ellos who can't appreciate pop music.
Ellos siempre escogen las mejores naranjas.
Here we might include the subject ellos to emphasize the fact that they always buy the best oranges.
So feel free to leave the subject out of the sentence, but remember, you can always keep the subject in for clarification, contrast, or emphasis.
Another important job of verbs is to let the reader know whether a sentence is positive or negative. So next, we're going to talk about how you can make sentences negative in Spanish, which happens to be a cinch. All you have to do is put the word no in front of the verb, and you'll never guess what the word no means. No or not.
I speak English and Spanish, but I do not speak Russian.
Hablo inglés y español, pero no hablo ruso.
See? All we had to do was put the word no in front of the second hablo to make it negative.
Sometimes you have to use the word no twice in the same sentence.
¿Quieres más comida?
No, no quiero más comida. See what I mean? This one's for the no, and that one's for the not. It's not what we English speakers are used to, but in Spanish, it makes perfect sense.